How's it going, everyone? I hope you're having an awesome day. Welcome to the channel. I'm the ChainBaker, and in today's video I've got another delicious brioche project for you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Brioche is the most versatile dough out there. You can make pretty much anything out of it. So let's go to the kitchen and have a closer look. So here it is, a beautiful golden brown glossy loaf of brioche. It is rich and fragrant. It's got this unique shape. Trust me when I say, the knife literally falls through this thing, it's so soft. And once we get to the interior, we can see there's swirls of beautiful custard running through it. It smells of cardamom and saffron, two very unique flavors, but they work really well together. And did I mention, it is super easy to make, just like any other brioche project on my channel. So let's get right to it and see what we need. We'll need some tins for baking the loaves in, a pot and a whisk for the custard, a rolling pin, scales, dough scraper, temperature probe, a brush, and a palette knife for spreading the filling on. As for the ingredients, for the custard, we'll need some sugar, egg yolks, cornstarch, vanilla paste, a pinch of saffron, some ground cardamom, we'll need some milk, and we will need the whole egg, which we're going to whisk and brush the loaf with before baking. For the brioche dough, we'll need some strong white bread flour, eggs, some cold butter, yeast, salt, sugar, and a bit of water. And I cannot stress this enough, temperature control is of utmost importance here. Your ingredients must be totally cold. I actually kept my flour in the freezer, so it's below 0 degrees. And as you can see, the eggs are about 4 degrees Celsius. I know we're just using a splash of water here, but that also needs to be completely cold. If your kitchen is really warm and your fridge doesn't go that low, put your ingredients in the freezer, but just pull them out before they're frozen solid. Now adding cold and hard butter into a dough would be quite difficult, so to make it nice and soft and pliable, we're gonna press it. Place the butter in between layers of parchment paper, then press it out using a rolling pin. The butter will be soft, but will still be cold. And once you've flattened your butter, take it off the paper and place it back into the fridge until you need it. I'll show you one more way how to control the temperature here. What I did was refrigerate my mixing bowl, and I kept the dough hook in the freezer all day long. And with all these measures in place, we are ready to make the fail-proof brioche dough. So in your mixing bowl, add the water, salt, yeast, sugar, eggs, and flour. Now, unlike all my other recipes, we are adding all the ingredients straight from the get-go. Normally when making dough by hand, I would suggest adding all the ingredients except the flour, giving them a mix, only then adding the flour. But when you're using a mixer, it doesn't really matter that much. Now bring your bowl up and set the mixer to low speed, which is second on my mixer. We want to bring the dough together and work it for around 10 minutes. It's important to get some gluten going before we start adding the butter, because adding butter too early will hinder gluten formation. But around 10 minutes later, the dough should be nice and strong already. Switch the mixer off and give your dough a pull, it should be nice and strong. From now on we can start adding the butter, so switch the mixer back on and throw the butter in chunks. Now a quick side note on the amount of dough that we're making. This is my full brioche dough recipe. But in this video, I will only end up using half of it. I'll use the other half for another project. The reason for making the full amount is that, as you can see, half of it would be near impossible to mix in the mixer properly. Even making the full dough requires some scraping down the sides and helping the mixer out once in a while. And once you have added all the butter, it's nearly disappeared, scrape down the sides of the bowl and keep mixing on low speed for another 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, turn the speed up. I'm gonna go to medium, which is number 4 on my mixer. I'll keep mixing the dough for another 7 minutes. So back to the amount of dough that we're making. I will only use half of it for this video. So if you want to, you can double the amount of all the other ingredients and simply make twice the amount of everything. Or you can do what I do, use half for this project and half for another. And you can find plenty more delicious uses for brioche dough in my brioche playlist. I highly suggest you check it out, because as I always say, brioche is the most versatile dough out there. So if you see the dough sticking to the sides of the bowl, scrape it up again and then keep mixing. And once the 7 minutes have passed, turn the speed down, back to low, which is number 2 on my mixer. And from here on, we only need to mix for another 3 minutes or so. And once that's over, the dough should not stick to the sides or the bottom of the bowl. And the total mixing time should not really exceed 25 minutes. And that is exactly why we need stone cold ingredients, because 25 minutes of mixing will really warm the dough up. And this looks good, it's nice and smooth and it's really strong. Now we can start the chilling down and the folding process. Get a bowl, and place your dough ball in it. Shape it into a ball before you do so it's nice and neat. If it feels a bit sticky, you can wet your hands with water to make it easier to handle. And at this point you want to take the dough temperature. It should be around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius. And this one's just about right, thanks to the cold ingredients. Now let's cover this up and pop it in the fridge for 1 hour. After the first hour of chilling, we need to give it a fold. Folding will make the dough stronger, give it more structure. It will also help with degassing it, and it will help with the chilling down process. As the surface of the dough cools down, the inside still stays warm. But when we fold it, we will distribute that temperature evenly throughout the dough, so that all parts of the dough ferment at the same rate. So dust your dough with light dusting of flour, place it out on the table smooth side down, stretch it out, then fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until it reaches the point where you started. You can actually go past the point you started, just until the dough ball is nice and tight. But don't make it too tight, because you don't want to tear the surface. Now flip the dough smooth side up again, tighten it against the table so it's nice and round. Now we can place it back into the bowl, cover it up and pop it in the fridge for another hour of chilling down. And after the second hour of chilling, we can divide it. As I said, this video requires half the dough, so I will weigh the dough and divide it into two. If you simply want to make double the amount of things, then keep the dough whole, and instead of dividing, you can simply give it another fold. But I will use half for this project and half for another. When dividing and weighing, also use a light dusting of flour, just to prevent any stickage. If your scales are not large enough, place a bowl or plate on them. This is quite a big piece of dough. And isn't that lucky, I cut it to the perfect weight. So after dividing, we need to shape them up. Shaping goes the same way as the folding earlier. Place your dough smooth side down, fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach the point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up, tighten it against the table, you can pick it up, pinch the seam together, and that's your dough ball done. Now we can wrap them up with some cling film so they don't dry out in the fridge. Make sure to not wrap it too tight, because the dough will expand. If you wrap it up too tightly, it may burst. And if it bursts, the part that comes out will get dry in the fridge, and part of your dough will be ruined. But that's all we need to do to make brioche dough. After this, we need to refrigerate it, and you can use it for any project you like. You can keep it in the fridge for up to 24 hours, but 12 to 16 hours will be perfect. Whilst the dough is cold proofing, we can make the custard. And this is the easiest custard ever, trust me. I stopped tempering my eggs ages ago, and I've never looked back. So simply grab your pot, combine the saffron, cardamom, cornstarch, sugar, vanilla paste, egg yolks and the milk. All the ingredients go in at once. And you can customize this. Don't like saffron and cardamom? Leave it out. In any case, bring the pot over to the stove, have it set on medium heat and whisk it occasionally until it starts warming up. Once the custard starts warming up, start whisking it continuously to prevent it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Once you feel it thickening, turn the heat off and continue whisking for another 30 seconds. This won't take more than 8 minutes in total. And there you have it, your custard's done. If it's a bit lumpy by any chance, you can pass it through a sieve. Once it's ready, pour it into a bowl, or you can cover it up with cling film. Make sure it's touching the surface of the custard to prevent the skin from forming. Now we can pop this in the fridge right next to the brioche and leave it to cool down completely. So it's the next day, the brioche dough is fully fermented, and now we can shape our loaves right away. Give the dough a generous dusting of flour. What I always like to do before I roll the dough with a rolling pin is to press it out by hand. This helps to get it into a general shape before you start rolling, and it will help you roll it more evenly. Once you have a nice flat disc, grab the rolling pin, start flattening it out even more. And we'll roll this to a big square, and be sure to measure it against your baking tin. You want to end up with loaves that fit. Be sure to not rush this step, you got loads of time. Just roll it out gradually, try and make it as square as possible, and try to roll it from the middle to the edge, so that the middle doesn't stay too thick. I'd suggest whisking up the custard a little bit before you use it so it's nice and smooth, and just spread it out in a thin, even layer all over the dough. If you don't have a spatula like this, you could get away with using your dough scraper. Now mark the dough out in 3 sections horizontally. They should be as close to the same size as possible. Next up, grab the part of the dough that's closest to you, lift it up carefully and fold it over. Try not to distort it too much. Organize it so it's nice and straight, and then grab the top part and fold that down. Now we have 3 layers of dough with 2 layers of custard, and from here on you could shape this into quite a few different ways. But the one I'm going to show you is quite unique, and I've never done it before. Give the dough a good dusting of flour on both sides. This will help us to avoid any unnecessary stickage. Now cut the dough in half. I'm gonna make 2 loaves, so I need 2 parts for that. Next up, cut the dough into strips, but leave the very top edge attached. I'm sure you see where this is going by now. There's not much to it, just make sure you cut it right through down to the table. Now we need to start twisting up these strips. And it's super simple, just grab a strip and twist it around itself. And if you'd like a more finer braided look, you can simply cut the dough into more strips. And the more you twist them, the more layers you will get. But of course don't go too crazy, you don't want to squish out the custard. The last thing we need to do is to roll this up into a loaf. To do this, start from the top where it's all attached. It is quite squishy and loose at this point, just roll it gradually. There's no need to rush. Try and roll it tight as well, you don't want this to be too loose, otherwise you'll end up with unnecessary air pockets inside the loaf. One thing worth mentioning about the end bits of the whole piece of dough that we had earlier, which are now the left side end piece on the loaf on the left and the right side end piece on the loaf on the right. If you did not cover it with custard properly, then that end piece might be a little bit empty. And if you want to avoid that, either spread your custard right to the edge or trim the end piece off. I hope that made sense, but it's not a big deal anyway. I've lined my tins with paper so the loaves don't stick. The final proofing time will depend on the temperature of your kitchen. It can take about 4 to 5 hours, but you can leave them in a warm area to rise quicker. But regardless of what you do, during the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven 160 degrees Celsius with a fan on. That's 320 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. And these babies are risen pretty well. All we need to do now is give them a nice egg glaze. This will make the crust extra beautiful and golden brown, and I'll show you how to make them super shiny after baking. And don't be too rough here, you don't want to poke the dough and distort it, just be nice and gentle. For an extra thick coat, you could brush them, leave them to dry for 5 minutes and then brush them again. But after they've been glazed nicely, pop them in the oven. They'll take around 30 to 35 minutes to fully bake. If you're not sure of the doneness of your bread, you can take its temperature. If it reads 94 degrees Celsius or 200 Fahrenheit in the middle, it's ready. These things are puffed up beautifully. The one on the left came out a little bit wonky, but it still tastes good. Now here's my little last minute trick. Brush the loaves with hot sugar syrup, made up of equal parts sugar and water. This will give them beautiful shine and keep the crust nice and soft for longer. Leave the loaves to set in the tin for around 10 minutes. This will help them keep their shape once you take them out. If only you could smell this, I bet my neighbors are jealous. They came out beautiful. I'm really happy with this result, especially the one I baked in the right tin. It would make an awesome present, by the way, and this could be probably the best French toast in the world in a couple of days. You can see that nice swirl of custard going through it, and that crust is just golden brown perfection. All there is left to do is to enjoy. And that concludes another brioche project, and it never gets old. So what did you think of this recipe? Is it something you would make? Let me know down in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click right here. Subscribe to the channel, click over here. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next one.